Navarro is a complete ideological crank who, by the way, just got out of prison and so is also in this like YOLO burn it all down mode. Lutnick seems to just be a complete idiot. And then you've got Besant there to try to like sane wash the whole enterprise.
In this video, Sam Seder and Emma Vigeland of the Majority Report with Sam Seder have guest Krystal Ball of Krystal, Kyle and Friends on to talk about Trump's agenda. I've done another video with Krystal Ball, Emma Vigeland, and Sam Seder, which you can find on the Majority Report with Sam Seder channel. I highly recommend it, and I found it hugely entertaining and very interesting. Let's watch this together. I'm going to have some thoughts as we go, and then I want to know what you think in the comments.
One wonders if, as he's getting hundreds of millions of dollars coming in with this meme coin thing, if he's going to fully sort of be able to wrap his head around or care about the implications of the tariffs. I mean, if Miller has been effective in shielding him from the idea that he's been basically telling his administration has been telling the Supreme Court, we're just not going to pay attention, building whatever sort of like, I think the Supreme Court at the end of the day wants to do what is consistent with, Republican and conservative ideology, but there's still some of that like, wait, we're judges type of mentality. I wonder if he's not shielded from that. Like, I feel like we're one good critique of Besant away, where if like Navarro gets a line in, like, did you see the shirt he was wearing today? And Besant goes, and then Navarro's back into the Oval Office.
Totally.
And, because Musk is gone, I really do think this is sort of like...
it's the Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller seems like the shadow president, but then Navarro is all over the tariff stuff. But like to that point in that Time interview, his quote was, "I love the concept of a millionaire tax hike, but it quote may not be acceptable to the public." So like that's the point is that that's how detached from reality he is. He's how he used to be able to be a very effective crowd surfer, but since he lost the election, he has had no tether to any sane society, to any sense of like liberal New York, even like elites, right? And he's been holed up in Mar-a-Lago, in OANNville. He doesn't even understand that, like, I know they're not going to do this millionaire tax hike, but you should know that that's a good thing for you politically if that's what you care about.
His view of the public is like the billionaires in his cabinet.
Exactly.
Like that's where he's getting his reading from. He's like, well, they probably won't like it, so we're going to avoid it. I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking about is all of these people are so brain poisoned. They're so like online brain poisoned. And I think one of the qualities of having that particular illness is that everything becomes sort of unreal to you, so like the massive carnage that you are perpetrating on the global economy and small businesses and on workers and what it's going to do to prices. Like it feels like nothing is really real, like nothing matters. That's always what people, nothing really matters.
Nihilistic presidency.
Yeah. And so I think it's that. I think also, in Trump's first term, he did some tariffs, much, much, much more limited than what we're talking about here. But there was economists were really concerned about what those tariffs were going to do and the price hikes and what would it mean for farmers, et cetera. And they did have negative impacts. I mean, farmers had to be bailed out under Trump 1.0. But I think in his mind, he's like, well, it didn't come to this catastrophic end that everyone predicted. And so I think he just doesn't, he just thinks he can do anything and that it will never have the consequences that the experts are really predicting. And, this plays into his view of the polls being wrong and those sorts of things. So I do think that plus he's a psychopath, so that doesn't help things. And I think there is just a total disconnect from the actual impacts of his policy. He definitely doesn't care whether or not Republicans win the midterms. I mean, he's not trying to work through Congress. He's doing whatever he wants on his own. So what difference does it make to him whether or not Republicans have control of the House, have control of the Senate?
I think all of that is true. And I think the people around him, the Stephen Millers, the, Russell Votes, I think that they have assured him that they're not going to need to worry about elections, that they're going to, get under the hood with elections and rig them and state by state or however their plan is to do it, that we're not going to have free and fair elections anymore. And Trump even said this on the campaign trail. Just vote me in one more time and you won't ever have to vote for it again. So I don't think that's Trump's mastermind plan, because I agree with Krystal Ball. I don't think he has any idea what's really going on. But I think the people around him, incompetent though many of them are, hopefully they're not competent enough to pull this off and we can delay it. But I think they are intending to see fit that elections won't matter, that they'll have enough control over them by the time midterms come around that they can make it any way they want.
And as I said before, I think you're going to see increasingly authoritarian tactics and police state tactics. And we're already seeing plenty of that, but I think that's going to continue to get ramped up as his popularity slips and there's more and more need for him to crush dissent and assert total control and dominance.
I think just to expand on what you're saying, I think, I wonder if part of what drives him on the tariff front is that Biden maintained those tariffs. And in some places, whether it was through the CHIPS Act or the IRA, he expanded on them. And he needs to sort of I'm going to be more than Biden. And then on the flip side, in terms of what we're going to see in terms of authoritarianism, in Trump 1.0, it felt like whenever there was any type of scandal, and there was a ton of scandals in that first term. I wonder if people remember how many people had to resign even by this point. I think there was 3 or 4, 5 resignations.
Priebus barely lasted a month or two.
But the guy from Oklahoma was at the EPA, was already talking about using his there was multiple people who had to be jettisoned. They're not going to jettison anybody. They're basically in for, I think, Hegseth could literally be projecting war plans, on a screen on the Pentagon, and I think he would be fine. But in that iteration of the Trump administration, they immediately went to attacking a black person. It was I can't remember all the different. There was a half a dozen, whether it was, the squad members, whether it was Kaepernick. There were so many. And I think they're going to use immigrants in that same way this time.
Yeah.
And I think they're hoping with that's going to be their elixir, I guess, to get out of, a bad news cycle.
Well,
at least that's Miller's perspective.
He thinks his biggest mistake in the first term was ever listening to anyone about anything. Yeah, that's what in the off season while they were out of office, the whole plan was, okay, whatever guardrails were in place last time, we may need to make damn sure none of those exist this time around. And this is actually a core sort of MAGA movement belief, is that the problem with Trump 1.0 was that you had, John McCain there to give the thumbs down on the healthcare. You had people like Jared Kushner, Mark Milley, or the deep state, or Esper to rein him in when he says, hey, let's shoot protesters in the knees. That is their assessment of what went wrong in Trump 1.0. So they took a very intentional, that's part of what Project 2025 was, a very intentional effort to make sure that whether it's Republicans in Congress, whether it's law firms, whether it's the media, whether it's universities, whether it's the courts, these things are not going to stand in their way this time. And, that's what Schedule F is about as well, making sure you only have loyalist sycophants in place so that this time around, if Trump says, hey, I want to do the Insurrection Act, there's not going to be anyone there to say, here's why that would be really horrible and you shouldn't do it. And, that's what we've seen. You couple that with, of course, the fact that the Supreme Court gave him blanket immunity, more or less. And you have someone who is just completely unhinged, absolute id, and going to go to the most maximalist places he has ever imagined. Just one other note on that. This is a point that Emily Jashinsky, who I work with, made that I thought was astute, which is on the tariffs specifically. If you actually wanted to do a real industrial protectionist policy involving tariffs that has some intelligence, some sort of intellect behind it, you would have brought back Robert Lighthizer. whether you agree with his ideology or not. This is a guy who's thoughtful, knows what he's talking about, could do something that was actually coherent. But you don't go with Lighthizer. Instead, you go with Howard Lutnick and Peter Navarro. Yep. And these types, Navarro is a complete ideological crank who, by the way, just got out of prison and so is also in this like YOLO burn it all down mode. Lutnick seems to just be a complete idiot. And then you've got Besant there to try to like sane wash the whole enterprise. So I thought that was an interesting indication too of even Lighthizer, because he had some level of intellectual independence, even though he was aligned with the stated MAGA protectionist goals, even he couldn't be brought into this administration.
I mean, that's interesting. I think, again, I think you're right. The number one factor to get hired was how much resistance are you going to put up? Or, am I going to be, are there going to be leaks about this? Which is why we're not seeing those same leaks this time, because they're all just loyalty was just their number one, credential that they needed to get the job.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's obvious. This is a fascinating conversation. If you haven't seen my other video, I encourage you to do it. Or even better, if you've got the 30 minutes, go to the Majority Report with Sam Seder, the channel there, and watch this conversation in its entirety. It's about half an hour long. I think we're heading into an accelerated time frame here as poll numbers start to drop. And the proverbial shit is beginning to hit the proverbial fan. And I'm not going to say it's an exciting time. Well, I guess from one angle it's exciting. It's kind of terrifying. But, we may actually see some of this start to fall apart. I do think, like a wounded animal, this administration is going to get even more dangerous before things get better. But let me know what you think in the comments.